Global Philippines Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index measures the performance of the manufacturing sector and is derived from a survey of 450 manufacturing companies. The index is based on 5 individual indexes measuring new orders, output, employment, among others. And a reading above 50 indicates expansion, below 50 represents contraction, while 50 indicates no change. Well, with us now for more is Jingyi Pan, the Economics Associate Director of PMI team at S&P Global Market Intelligence. So good to see you, Jingyi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, good morning, Katie. Thank you for having me on Money Talks.
Yeah, you know, you've been watching and tracking the indicators all the way from where you're at on the Philippines for 5 years, the source of all the PMI data we get on the Philippines. Just take us through the March figures because that completes for us the first quarter. And we saw that March fell below 50, and that's pretty critical because now that means it's a contraction.
Indeed, Katie, and I like how you've just explained as well that the PMI itself is actually a combination of 5 different factors, but 2 of the biggest one that we certainly always urge people to watch, the new orders and also the output index, those have actually also fallen below 50 for the first time in over a year and at the fastest pace for both in over 3 years. This itself is actually highlighting, well, on one hand with the new orders, which is really demand conditions, lightening what we have seen across the comments coming through from Philippines manufacturers, pointing to increased competition, but I think it really reflects as well a story of just really the demand itself is actually getting a little bit dried up in that sense around the region, and that's leading to some of this more competitive pricing among manufacturers in the region as well. And on the other hand, with output production, which we look at most closely for, well, manufacturing production trends over there, that's also showing us towards the end of the first quarter, things have actually slowed down. So to a large extent, I think the bigger backstory here is also that some of the, well, positive momentum that we have spotted really from some of the front loading ahead of planned tariffs, as you talk about in a few hours, you might be hearing what's going to happen. But we have seen manufacturers putting in that kind of operations in response to the front loading, and that itself has actually much, well, kind of diminished towards the end of first quarter so far. And for the Philippines, I think, yeah, among the ASEAN economies with the ASEAN manufacturing we published this morning, I think they are among one of the ones that's really seeing that slowdown coming through, Katie.
So in comparison then and relative strengths, if you will, is the Philippines in the middle of the pack or are we slowing faster than other ASEAN economies?
Well, so among the ones that have actually improved this month itself in March, we see the likes of Singapore, Indonesia, and also Vietnam. Thailand was a little bit more towards the middle when we talk about output. And of course, with Philippines, yeah, it's actually in the lower half, below 50. I think this itself doesn't perhaps come across as so much a surprise. The likes of Philippines and the South Korea, Taiwan are among the regions where we are seeing more of this front-loading driven improvement in manufacturing conditions, well, dry a little bit faster, perhaps compared to some other regions, including, well, to Vietnam, Malaysia, these are the ones that are having a little bit more of this potential coming through with the electronics upcycle. For Philippines, though, I just really want to say our forecast colleague do still see quite a positive growth of around 5.8% for the year itself, but that's a lot seeing what's going to happen on the services side as well, Katie.
Which leads us to jobs and the impact that this has. I mean, we had caveats in the last round of reporting. We still had growth in new orders, albeit moderating, but we don't have that now. So what impact is this now having on employment? Are we losing jobs?
Well, the latest number itself is right smack at 50, so that is actually showing unchanged employment conditions, despite the fact that industrial production, I would say our manufacturing output itself had actually slowed down in March. So this itself is actually giving us a story of that. We did see a bit of a slowdown, but I think a lot of the manufacturers in Philippines are actually still in a bit of a wait and see, sentiment. That itself, stemming from the expectations, I think at the start of this conversation, we have seen with the title as well, that confidence itself had risen highest in 4 months. to put it into context, that it is actually still below the long run average reading for our future output index, which is the only sentiment index where Philippines manufacturers tell us, do they expect output to increase, decrease, or stay unchanged in the next 12 months. So this is largely stemming from the fact that some hopes, I think, that's been told to us regarding the expectations that elections coming through and also potential for lower interest rates, that's actually lifting sentiment slightly among Philippines manufacturers. But on the long run basis, I think, a lot of them are also very much concerned over the impact on tariffs, on what that might actually mean as well for production in the next year.
Yeah, but that's assuming cost pressures come off. I mean, how are they looking in terms of cost pressures? The rate of charge inflation, that nearly leveled off last February. Did that carry on?
Indeed, we did see, the inflation situation, it is still actually, prices are still increasing both on the input price and output charges side of things, but those are only very marginal. If we talk about output charges, which is what we see the closest towards, factory inflation, I know prior to this itself, you also talk a little bit on producer prices. I think, we do see a bit of lag effect between what we have so in other words, our data itself on the prices side do actually provide a bit of a forward lead in terms of what the official numbers itself typically do. So earlier towards the end of last year, we did find inflation conditions being a little bit steeper, but that has already tapered off. And even up till now, I think we're only seeing marginal inflation, which altogether actually really bodes well for the interest rates to be further lowered by the central bank, given the conditions, especially from the manufacturing side. But of course, I think we do have to see the situation as well on the tariffs implications in the coming months. But right now, we're definitely tracking these, and that's not giving us a sign of concern yet.
And maybe midterm elections. In just about a minute, how is the upcoming midterm elections having a boost on consumption spending, and how that's influencing the manufacturers' views at this stage?
A great question, Katie. So I think we talk about the sentiment itself actually picking up to the highest level in 4 months. I will say largely very much attributed to the fact that we have this positive sentiment over what the midterm election may actually mean for potentially better, infrastructure, disbursement, and so on and so forth. But over and above that, I think we're also seeing just that itself generating some of this optimism among manufacturers. While they kept employment unchanged, they've actually raised their inventory. So you're seeing stocks of purchases, stocks of finished goods, those have actually increased in our latest PMI readings, and that's showing manufacturers themselves potentially seeing that itself being a source of their higher production in the next couple of months post-election, and therefore they are keeping inventory. So we're going to monitor that situation because I think it matters as well for how production is going to be down the road.
Got that. Well, thank you so much for dissecting the PMI data for us, fresh off the list there. Jingyi Pan of S&P Global in Singapore.